We're in here. We're at my house, and I have with me Augee from TNVC. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Yeah, fucking
glad to be here.
Yeah, what to say? Like the 9:50. It was funny. We were chatting. We had dinner earlier. And we're just talking about just the fact being like night owls and just kind of transcending towards that and.
Yeah, I mean, it goes with working in the night vision industry. I mean, that's what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it that our collective value system says that we all need to wake up like with the sun, but I've always tended a little later.
Yeah, and then that's just the nature of the beast too. It's me. But yeah, it's so interesting. So with explaining for those, I'm sure there's some people who will be listening who don't really know much about what night vision in general, and then especially but TNVC. So what exactly is TNVC?
So TNVC, we are based out of Southern California, but we have staff members kind of all over the country. We've got a little bit of a concentration actually here in the Southeast as well, but we are a distributor and dealer of night vision, thermal, and visual augmentation systems technology, and the various accessories. Basically anything that kind of has to do with night vision and vast technology, up to and including IR aiming lasers for weapons, red dot sights and mounts and stuff like that. We kind of deal a little bit in all of that.
Yeah, very cool. And I can say, especially from my point of view, like we had chatted earlier, is that when you first come into it and you're looking at it, it can be incredibly overwhelming. But one thing that you said, and then also I've experienced, is you guys have a great just educational system in front for customers in general.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of been So I joined TNVC in 2018. TNVC's been around since I want to say about 2005.
Okay.
If I recall correctly. So the company's been around for a long time, but kind of from the very beginning, like as I told you before, really the at least part of the genesis of TNVC and becoming a dealer of night vision and night vision technology was because our owner himself got kind of a bum deal on some night vision stuff back in the day, and got so frustrated with the fact that there wasn't any good information out there on the equipment, and so he went and ultimately started his own night vision company. So TNVC, our kind of core mission has always been education, educating consumers, educating the market. And, a lot of that's kind of working on that theory that the more educated the consumer is, the better everyone involved is.
Sure.
It means that the customers are getting better deals. It pushes it pushes us, it pushes the manufacturers, it pushes everybody to just kind of improve the quality of the product and really talk honestly and transparently about the products that we're selling. Like we talked about before, night vision and other visual augmentation systems technologies being very highly technical. A lot of times, a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with it, mm-hmm. or even if they have experience using it, as end users in the military, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know a lot about it. They mm-hmm. They know how to use what they were handed, but they might not really know much about the technical details of that. So in the past, I mean, even now, but less so than it used to be when TNVC started and in the years past, it was really easy to screw people.
Yeah.
It was really easy to kind of say the right buzzwords, to kind of not tell the whole truth.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, I think I've heard people talk about the night vision industry as being kind of like Game of Thrones, or
damn,
there being an unusual concentration of shady folks within the night vision industry, and I'll have to admit that it's not wholly untrue. And a lot of that comes from, that particular fact is that there was, again, less so now, more so we're talking like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, there's a lot of, it was a lot of potential for basically screwing people with not a whole lot of knowledge. You can talk about, so nowadays people have kind of a general expectation of what a Gen 2 tube looks like versus a Gen 3 tube. 15, 20 years ago, maybe was not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And if you've never looked through night vision before, how are you
how would you know
to tell, whether or not you got a good tube?
Yeah.
If you've never seen a good tube,
point of reference,
then you get what you get, and you say, oh well, this looks cool, I guess.
So there's probably some people out here who got some bum deals earlier on, who think that night vision might be overrated at this point.
Yeah, so we get that. We get that a lot.
Like references.
Some of that is like you said, from people who've gotten screwed in the past, or people who've used low quality night vision in the past. Sometimes from service members, we get a lot of like, oh, night vision is worthless, I never used that stuff. The thing about that is that in a lot of time, in a lot of circumstances, the level of training given, even within the military on the use of night vision technology, and night vision equipment is very highly variable.
Yeah.
From organization to organization, from person to person. You could get kind of a mentor or an older NCO or something like that who really walked you through how to use the equipment, or you could have gotten in line, gone to the supply room, got handed your green bag, and you were just absolutely on your own. We've had guys and we've worked with guys who spent 10 years in the military and didn't realize that the front and back lenses both can adjust.
That was me. Without going into too much detail, the pair that I got was from a friend. It was actually someone else's, and I was getting them, and I was like I said, when I got them, I was super impressed. Like when I got having expectations levels was already high, and I was like, okay, wow, this is actually pretty impressive. And I was like, man, I'm kind of bummed out that I was like, it just, some things I was like, I guess this is the difference between when you start stepping up in models and stuff like that. And then I remember just putting them on one day, and just typical person who had just gotten them walking around the house, dicking around, messing with them. And then I had the focusing caps, punching a hole through them, and I just happened to push them back on. One was falling off, and I noticed it turned, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh my God, you're telling me something's falling off. And so when I was doing it, I noticed it was focused. I'm like, oh my God, man. And I just sit there face palm, and I immediately texted the guy, and I was like, by the way, I just, for reference, I just realized you could, he's just laughing his ass off because he's an experienced user. And, but yeah, so sorry, I just had to insert that.
No, I mean that, but so that, obviously it's life-saving equipment in many circumstances, but the kind of inconsistency of the amount of training, like I said, even within the military service, even within guys who are presumably going to rely on this equipment for their lives and to potentially make ultimate decisions about others' lives potentially. It's a little disheartening how inconsistent the level of training and the level of knowledge is, throughout the military on just the equipment in general and how to use it, how to employ it. And, that is another one of those reasons that education is very much part of the core of what we do at TNVC. We were talking about it before as well. We are perfectly well aware that a lot of times we are putting out information that, is going to be used, going to be picked up by our commercial competitors within the market, that customers are going to either just look at the information that we put out publicly or call us, and spend an hour on the phone with us and then go buy from someone else. That's just kind of part of the territory. We understand that, and we accept that. It's of course it's a little. It can be a little bit frustrating, when a guy calls you up on the phone and says, "So I'm looking at a used PVS 14," and then launches into what ultimately becomes a 45-minute, hour-long conversation about the various things to look for. But ultimately we're not going to kick you off the phone if you tell us that you're buying from someone else. We're going to share the information as freely as we can. Obviously, there's going to be certain things that whether it's proprietary information, competitive information that we're not going to tell anyone. But I mean, like I said, I've had that conversation with people who say, I'm looking into used PVS 14. Can you tell me what to look for? And not only will I explain to them kind of the basics of night vision in general, but I'll even walk them through a used PVS 14, not something that we sell, specifically what to look for, when trying to look at and evaluate somebody's used PVS 14. Which
is the amount of inputs, you could get from a used model you don't have in front of you, I could imagine is endless too.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things, there's a lot of parts out there. Obviously PVS 14's, been in service for over 2 decades. I mean, it's been around forever. Tons of them have been built. There's components all over the place. There's varying levels of quality in terms of components that are out there, and then varying levels of skill in terms of the people who are out there assembling them. So while the basic core components might all generally kind of be the same, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all equal. One of the things that I'll say to people when because people ask about that, they'll ask about why should I buy a TNV built system or a newly built system from a vendor, when I can just watch YouTube videos and build it yourself. And I tell them, it's like, you can build an AR-15 from watching YouTube videos with a Gerber and a couple of hammers. And if you don't care about barrel nut torque specs, care about having the right tools. I mean, you can jam that thing together and you can take it to the range and it'll probably shoot. And being honest, like, you probably won't die.
Yeah.
But, and there are tons of people out there who do that, who've done that. But that, doesn't necessarily mean that that's, what you want as kind of your duty grade rifle. That doesn't make that, the same level of quality.
High functioning,
like a factory built rifle from a reputable manufacturer. There's a reason that, manufacturers build rifles in particular ways with the proper tools and with the proper quality control and quality assurance procedures, and it's the same thing with night vision. Yes, the parts are out there. The instructions on how to do it are out there. There are some ways in which assembling a night vision device are more technical than an AR-15, but there are some ways in which it's also much easier. But again, there's a lot of detail work, and there's some knowledge and skill required in there. And then beyond that, then you start getting into questions of new parts versus used parts, warranties, and customer service and customer support and all of that. But really, in terms of just the basic device itself, I mean, not all PVS 14s are created equal.
Yeah, it's so I guess I remember seeing like the different build kits, like getting the tubes and stuff. Which even like looking at that, I was like, I'm not I don't want to even touch on that. I didn't even want to even like look at that or even consider it, just because of just the amount of it's a lot of money in hand. If you do, I don't know, I think a lot of people, like their first rifle they quote unquote build, normally they, will scuff, mark, or do something incorrectly, or forget something, or, kind of like, mess around with it too much. And something like with night vision was like always like one of those things. I'm like, love doing it myself, but I don't want to even touch on it. I'll probably let someone do it.
So I mean, and yeah, so I have never assembled a night vision device on my own. Like, I know how to do it. Cool. I know what the components are supposed to be. I've seen it occur. I know what the tools are. I know how you're supposed to do it. But I mean, when I get a collection of parts that I want built into a functional night vision device, I'm not sitting there wrenching on it myself. I send it to Jacob, our build manager, and have him assemble it properly for me, because that's what he does, and it's not what I do.
Yeah, dude, that cracks me up that you'll actually have people who will be calling you about build units and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, we get get calls like that all the time.
Yeah, but like I remember like not having a conversation, but I remember listening a long time ago, and it was like in regards to like customer support, like customer satisfaction, all that in general. And it was talking about like, I think it was like in regards to this one guy, he would go to this one audio store, like high-end top-line audio store. And it was kind of like that, it's kind of like the standards.
Yeah.
Go there, wouldn't necessarily always buy something, but he'd ask questions or look at it. And with the thought process when he does buy something, because of all the support and all the help and everything, like the service he received, that when he had the chance, he would come back. So, I mean, I would like to think that you guys going out of your way, knowing that someone may not buy it right there or whatever, but in the long term, they'll know.
I mean, and there's practical Machiavellian reasons to support, even customers and calls like that, because, at the end of the day, even if you're not buying your PVS 14, even if you're looking at a used PVS 14, and you're not going to buy it from TNVC, we've got laid out here. There's a lot of things that go along with, with this technology and actually employing it. Helmets, mounts, lasers, so. The theory there is, if you wanted to put it in those kinds of transactional terms, is, I can tell this guy to screw off if you're not going to buy from me, and I'm never making money off that customer ever again. Or I can answer his questions. I can do my best to help him or her, with what they have, and maybe in the future they come back, when they have other needs that we can fulfill. Which is not to say that I am treating every customer interaction as transactional. But, if when you want to talk about just kind of customer service writ large, broad theory of how you deal with with customers
interactions,
and why you would educate your potential competition or those who aren't going to buy from you immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it pays dividends, whether or not. So that works out. Well, that's a great answer, and extended and stuff like that. So with that being said, and you said you started working back in 2018 or so.
Yep. So 2018 is when I started working full time with TNVC.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I don't think we've said it beforehand. Give it like 1 second, not to release those heathens. But I think you said before you were a teacher like that. You were a teacher before, but you had been in the Army or the National Guard.
Yeah. So I So, I've been in the Army National Guard, since 2006. Did 2 deployments to Afghanistan and a deployment to Kosovo. So the kind of tactical industry, shooting, and night vision in particular, was always something that interested me. It was always kind of a hobby of mine. It wasn't necessarily something, I mean, like I said, I was a guardsman. I did, I did my deployments, but even the military was not something that I was really looking at doing full time. Doing full time. I was still a part timer. And so, yeah, I was in graduate school working on a degree in English literature. I was a graduate teaching assistant, among other things. And I was, for a while, I was an adjunct professor. So I was teaching English composition to college sophomores and freshmen.
Yeah, pretty big change at lifestyles there, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was,
My lab is always having to be in the middle of something. And, of course, the one place I put it to avoid him hitting it is the time he bumps into it. But that's life, right?
I mean, it was a big transition. I mean, or I wouldn't say it was a big transition because, like I said, I had always kind of been... I'd always kind of kept my fingers within the industry. I knew people, and it was what I was interested in, and I spent, it was my hobby. I spent a good bit of time with it, and like I said, I was doing some work moonlighting in the industry, working for companies on a part-time basis or a consulting basis here and there. So it wasn't like I took a complete 180. And started doing something completely unrelated to what I had been doing previously. It was just that kind of my primary focus shifted a little bit more.
Yeah. Have you found now that something that hobbies and passionate about, does it kind of burn it out for you now that it's like your primary job, or does it just really kind of make not really even a job at this point, kind of more of just extension?
So, I mean, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's, a simple answer to that.
Sure,
I mean,
that's an extensive,
with any job, there are parts of it that you get burned out,
exhausted,
once in a while. And, again, with every job, not every component of your job, is going to be the most fun thing to do.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of things, when you're doing a job that
always
you
fun.
have to do. You have to do some unpleasant things.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast. But I wouldn't say that working in the industry or working with night vision professionally has made me like it less or enjoy it less. There may be some things that I'm more cynical about these days than I used to be. There may be some things where I may even kind of lose perspective or context on the fact that most people don't have like 8 sets of dual tube night vision goggles sitting on the shelf that they can just cycle through and swap through as the mood strikes them. But no, I mean, overall, I would say I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I'm one of those people who started working in a field and a job of something that they were interested in, they were a hobby, and it made them hate it.
Yeah. So that being said, in regards to just because night vision is an expensive thing to kind of like dip your toes in, in the first place, but it is a lot of fun, especially if you actually, utilize everything.
Yeah.
There's always, and we were talking about earlier with the customer service questions and stuff like that. I did put a thing out, just to see like some general questions. We'll do like 3. They're just, simplistic that actually, that aren't your generic stuff. So, let's see what we got here. Just go through and answer, look at a couple. And there's some good ones. So this is from Drucifer. Best helmet-mounted ear pro setup for the money, i.e. ear pro mounts individually, etc. So like I'm assuming kind of like in regards to setting up with the amps or contacts and stuff like that.
So, I mean, I think that, I guess the listeners cannot see, but you can see that
we got some stuff
I
in
don't
front.
use helmet mounted comms. And I think some of that, some of that, comes from my military background, and I mean, helmets these days are a lot more lightweight and a lot more comfortable than the first helmets that I wore. At the same time, I'll tell people if I don't have to be wearing a helmet, I am not wearing a helmet. But there are times where I might need hearing protection. There are times where
Sure.
I may need, to have access to my comms or something like that. And to me, it's always just been a little bit too restrictive to have, the hard mounted, helmet mounted comms. I mean, there's some advantages to it. As well, especially when it comes to stabilization of the helmet and everything like that. But so personally, I don't use helmet mounted comms. I use them in the over the head configuration, and that's kind of the way that I roll. So with that context, though, I mean the OpsCore amps, I think are probably my favorite. My favorite hearing protection and comms gear that I've used so far. The rail arm kits that kind of attach to the rear of the arc rails. I mean, it's a great system. So generally speaking, when somebody asks me about helmet mounted comms, that's typically my recommendation. Again, after giving them a little bit of context in that it's not something that I personally use very extensively.
Yeah. How would and this is like even coming from me, because I've even looked at the amp. I've always just run either like Comtacs or basic whatever. How do Comtacs compare to amps, like in regards, not even necessarily communication?
So I mean, I haven't used them a whole lot, but what are they up to now? 6, right? They're up to 6s now.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe even 7. Yeah, but
I mean, I've heard some great things about the newer Comtacs. The last Comtacs that I have an extensive amount of time on is the 3s.
Yeah.
Which in comparison to the Comtac 3s, the amps. They have the NFMI capability with the earplugs. If you want that capability, the versions that I use, which have the modular down leads, that to me is a great thing, because that's the thing that that was one of the things that always annoyed me about the Comtacs when I didn't have comms connected. Is you have these dangling these dangling leads coming off, or you need to find some way with rubber bands and Velcro and lash them up and stuff like that. And the 3D hearing environment of the amps, I mean, is just absolutely fantastic. And again, when I first tried the amps, my primary experience with Comtacs prior to that was with the 3s. Again, I've tried some of the later models, and I mean, I think they're good, and Comtacs will always have, I spent probably, at least a decade using Comtacs almost exclusively. I tried Sordins, the
I didn't like the
various
Sordins.
MSA versions. So something about them, they and particularly the headband, because again, I primarily use over the head comms. Just absolutely gave me a splitting headache, and I don't think it had anything to do really with the product itself in terms of the hearing protection or the communications capability, but just that headband didn't work for me.
Yeah, man.
So Sordins have just never been my jam. But Comtacs, I have and will always have kind of a soft spot in my heart. But that being said, right now I'm primarily using amps.
Amps, yeah.
And again, the later, the 5s and 6s have definitely, both from what I've seen and then from what I've heard from people who do use them, have integrated a lot of great features and great improvements over the 3s. But again, right now I'm primarily just using amps.
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, especially in the past, let's say year or so, the cost of Comtacs shot through the roof too, and it's like you're paying almost $600-700 for a pair with a single or dual lead. And it's like for a little bit more, it's kind of tempting almost.
Yeah, I mean, contacts are yeah, the contacts I always found, a little bit funny in the pricing, the pricing for contacts that you can see, where it's one of those things where like the used and secondhand market pricing is a lot of times like just way out, just do not resemble the MSRP list prices, and some of that has to do with just the volume that find themselves out kind of in the world, especially when a product becomes adopted by the military or is significant use by law enforcement or something like that. If you look at the MSRPs of the old Contact 2s and 3s, I don't think that the pricing model has necessarily, and I could be wrong. It's not a product that we carry, so I guess I haven't followed the pricing as closely. But I don't think that the actual retail pricing is really that far out of line with what it's always been. I think it's just there's more other products on the market, and there's not as many. There's not as many out there being issued that are walking off that make so you're paying on the second hand on the used market. You're paying a lot closer to MSRP than you used to be with older models of contacts.
Yeah, that's very true too, and it's just funny too because when you look at it, especially because you don't even really see a lot of 5s secondhand whatsoever. It's mostly just 3s, but they still they'll go for that price of like a 5, like a brand new model, and dated. That's funny. So we have bringing it back to night vision too, for example, like the USGI J-arm that comes with the PVS-14. So obviously, with any of our TNV systems, you get a free J-arm. We sell J-arms on our website at a retail price of like $80 or something like that. And that's what they cost. That's a fair price based on what they cost from the manufacturer. However, you go anywhere where there's a military base, and you go to any one of a million surplus shops right outside of the gates. If you're paying, and I'll tell people this on the phone too, when they ask to buy, a J-arm, and if it's an individual customer asking me, to sell them a J-arm, I'll just be like, listen, go on eBay, pay $15-20 for a J-arm. I know everybody knows that's not the cost of them. That's because it's already been paid for, and it's already been paid for somewhere along the line. Yeah, it's being flipped at this point.
And it's just floating around out there, and so it's another one of those things where there's a particular price that it's quote unquote supposed to be, but then there's
gray area,
the street price of that particular item. It's the same thing with like Rhino mounts and stuff like that. So a lot of times, like I said, when it comes to things like that, it's one thing if we have a law enforcement agency that needs to buy them, needs to buy them, manufacturer direct in quantity. Obviously we're going to do that. But if you if you pop up on Facebook, or if you call me as an individual and you're like, can I buy an $80 J-arm from TNVC? And be like, just go to eBay, go to the surplus shop.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate stuff like that all the time, but that's pretty funny. So we'll do. Let's see. One question's more simple, but this other one's pretty good. And I think we kind of chatted about it a little bit. But future of quad tubes for civilians, or does the market move to thermals or some other tech? Because but quads are already available to the civilians. It's just you're paying a nice entry fee.
Yeah. So
a bigger entry fee. And I think you have a set over there too.
Yeah. So earlier this year, we were able to work out with L3 Harris. So TNVC is actually the exclusive commercial distributor of the GPNVG.
There you go.
And you know, a lot of people have a lot of different things to say about that at times, and so here's the thing. When we talk about exclusive commercial distributor, we're well aware that there are guys that have gotten gray market units through various provenances. We know that there are guys who had a buddy who had a buddy.
Yeah.
That got a good guy deal. We know that there are other ways to get GPNVGs, and that there are other guys who have gotten GPNVGs not through TNVC out there. But commercial distribution is a completely different thing. Ultimately, you don't need to have some sort of like buddy deal. You don't need to do you don't need to. If you can afford it, they are now available, warranted, direct from L3 Harris with the spec sheets. Completely above board. Nobody's going to look at you sideways for having it. That's what commercial distribution means. Doesn't mean that there's not other ways to get these things. So earlier this year, we were able to kind of work out a deal with L3 Harris to become the commercial distributor, the exclusive commercial distributor of the GPNVG. We also brought the BNVDs, the PBS 31s to market, the BNVD 1531, so we again completely above board when L3 Harris builds it, when they when they fulfill our order, they're fulfilling it for commercial inventory,
sure,
not for a law enforcement agency so that somebody can
shuffle it down
the
road.
or dealer demo samples, quote unquote, or the various other ways that guys had previously had to get a hold of these, and then obviously if you don't have the right connections, then you can't have it, and so there was this kind of cool guy factor,
sure, yeah,
that came along with them, and I think that's where some of the anger and some of the butt hurt comes from over the commercial availability. It's like, oh, you're not special anymore.
Yeah, it took away the card from it. Yeah,
for having these.
Well, like with those two, because I know there's like a whole thing with them as well. One, like, obviously, it's the field of view that really is the biggest comparison or quality of tube. Right. Like, what makes those different overall?
Well, so the quality of tube, I mean, it depends entirely on what tube you put in it. That
sure.
is to say, I mean, they are our standard mil-spec unfilmed white phosphor 10160 style Anvis tubes. So, I mean, you could put, theoretically speaking, again, if you don't have the proper tools and fixtures, I wouldn't recommend that most people go opening things up and messing around with the insides. But theoretically speaking, you could put, anything from a 1989, original Omni 1 Anvis tube in the system to the latest and greatest tube that's available now, and it's going to work.
Yeah.
So I mean they use standard 10160 tubes. It's just it's and depending on the contract, the minimum acceptable specifications will vary. Depending on A, what your needs are, and B, what you're willing to pay for ultimately. So yeah, I mean, but so there's nothing special per se about the tubes unless you're ordering special unless you're ordering specific tubes. And then of course when you talk about contract specifications and you talk about contract minimums and stuff like that, when we when you talk about that what people sometimes fail to really realize or understand is that the tube specs that you're getting are falling along a standard distribution curve. So if the minimum spec of a particular goggle, of an unfilmed white phos system is 1800 or 1792 FOM or something like that, that means you're getting a distribution curve wherein the vast majority are going to be higher than that minimum. There's going to be a small number, a small percentage of them that are closer to the minimum, and then there's going to be a small percentage of them that vastly exceeds the minimum. But the majority of them are going to be kind of within that center curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So overall, I mean, they are an expensive unit. Is it just because like the numbers that are produced, or is it the actual housing? Like what makes them like what is it? I mean, you're also having 4 tubes,
right,
compared to just 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's a number of different factors that go into the cost of GPNVGs. Obviously, production numbers are a part of it. Amortization of research and development costs are a part of it. The complexity of the system, having to supply not just 4 tubes, but having to supply 4 closely enough match tubes that it doesn't kind of give you the low grade headache when you're looking through them. Which if you have a set of goggles even with mismatched tubes or misaligned tubes, some people may or may not have experienced. And then, again, it's obviously a single tube device. You don't really have to align a PBS 14 to anything. Every tube's going to have a little bit of optical shift in them. And so through a process known as collimation is when you bring, in a binocular system, you bring the optical shift of those tubes close enough to within tolerances of one another that it's largely imperceptible by the human eye, and it's within the adjustment ranges of the goggles and everything like that. And there's specific test sets in order to set this and in order to test that. With a set of quads, you got to do that to all 4 of them.
Yeah.
All 4 of them have to be aligned within, and the process of collimation usually involves rotating the eyepiece lens assembly and kind of zeroing out the shift that way. Obviously, you can see from here because of the hybrid eyepiece lens design of the GPNVGs, you can't do it that way. You have to accomplish that alignment through a different means. So all of that, kind of
adds up.
Kind of goes into the price of what a GPNVG costs, and then ultimately at the end of the day, L3 Harris is making they're going to make their cut as well. There's a certain amount of profit built into there, and in terms of mil spec mil spec panoramic goggle, L3 is the only show in town, or a mil spec Gen 3 panoramic goggle. Now, Photonis Defense recently came out with
the bridged,
their panoramic goggle system, which I want to say off the top of my head retails for about 35 or 38 or something like that. So it's a little bit cheaper than the GPNVG, but not that much cheaper. And then of course, the elephant in the room that everyone is going to going to want to bring up is the Chinese knockoff panoramic goggle housing, which is out there, and there have been various people who've bragged about building these systems for significantly lower than the cost of a GPNVG, which, if you want to throw together a Chinese knockoff housing. First of all, these overseas produced units, they're not. First and foremost, they're not paying the same amount for raw materials and for labor, just to assemble them in the first place. There's no research and development cost to amortize, because while there are some cosmetic differences, cosmetic changes, they have just copied something, something that already existed out there. And then just beyond that, there are various ways to cut corners with components, optical lens assemblies, lower cost tubes, and then again you run into that whole image alignment problem, which collimation has been a subject of a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth over the years, and some people seem to have this idea that if you wear a set of uncollimated goggles, you're immediately going to have a migraine headache, and you're not going to be able to wear them. And they assume, whether it's with Chinese built panos, whether it's with Bridge PVS 14s, they're like, well, I don't immediately get a headache when I put these on, so collimation must not be that important. Where it's really, unless the collimation error is just vast, most of the time our brains, our eyes are malleable enough to kind of adjust to them, and kind of bring the images together.
Fix it for you. Yeah.
But there's a cumulative effect of fatigue, both mental and physical, that comes along with that, which is why collimation, alignment, and adjustment is an important factor with any kind of multi-tube system. But that doesn't mean that if you throw on a pair of Chinese panos that have not been optically aligned or collimated at all, that you're instantly going to get a migraine headache and not be able to wear them. You can probably wear them for a couple hours, and if you're not doing anything all that terribly intense, you can probably last a good while with them, and you'll just have kind of a mild headache at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Versus a well-aligned set of goggles that should prevent much of that fatigue, much of that strain that you end up getting. But I think we've gotten very far afield of what the original question was.
No, but still, because it's always something. It's kind of one. It has kind of like an allure, right? It's kind of mystical in its own way because of original, like you said, being the kind of the gated way of obtaining them, and now that they're a little more available, there's still a pretty large entry fee comparison too. And they're cool.
And being in Hollywood movies always helps. Always helps.
Video
your popularity.
games,
there's definitely a certain amount of cachet associated with the GPNVGs. What I will say is that the GPNVG program, despite what some people have tried to claim, there have been claims that the reason that we were allowed to bring the GPNVGs to the commercial market is because they were being discontinued. The GPNVGs are continuing to be built. They're continuing to be fielded. They're continuing to be purchased by the military. And the panoramic goggle concept is continuing to be developed. So the L3 Harris has built a small number of the F-panos, the Fusion panoramic goggles, which are a panoramic goggle that also have a fusion channel, like the Fusion goggle systems, the PSQ36s, and now the ENVGB. That being said, if I had to look in my crystal ball, I would say that panoramic goggles are always going to be a little bit more specialized. And if you look at where the development of vast technology is trending, within the DoD and within kind of larger organizations, I mean, fusion is definitely more common, more popular. So you have the Marine Corps with the PVS-31 Deltas, which are the Elbit F5032s with the Optics 1 E-Cody clip-on thermal imager, which projects a thermal channel into your analog image intensification night vision. The ENVGB, which is the enhanced night vision goggle binocular, both L3 and Elbit. Have versions that are undergoing field testing by the Army. The Army is looking at the ENVGB as their primary, NVG for close combat troops. So it's the more popular configuration out there for sure seems to be a dual tube analog system with thermal channel, and then we can start talking about things like the IVAS system, which is the Microsoft HoloLens technology and digital image intensification and thermal sensors built in. I think for a while they were using them to do rapid COVID fever scans. When COVID hit and the field testing kind of got stalled a little bit. Because, no one was sure what all we could and couldn't do. And when everyone was going around with those
hitting you right in the head, see what your temperature was.
Those thermometer guns. I think they shifted one of the pilot programs into using it to try and detect whether or not people were running a fever using the IVAS, using the IVAS systems. And then and then we can go further talking about multispectral systems and out of band systems, a lot of which are still there's still a very tight lid on, and things like that. So I think panos are awesome. Panos are not dead. But I would say that panos are probably most likely always going to be a little bit more of a specialized tool. I don't think that I don't really believe, and I could be wrong. Obviously this is just kind of my guess, my prediction. I don't think that we're going to really see a force where
mass trimmed or anything.
Where everyone every private and specialist is issued a set of panoramic goggles.
Yeah. So, and that was pretty much the style. I think regardless whether it was obviously extensive, but hey, I enjoyed it because I was definitely going on and adding on stuff too, because I was definitely curious, because they are, like I said, they're just a very unique unit. So they still use the Anvis mounting system on the top.
So there's two versions.
Sure.
So this one that I've got here, this is the Anvis version, the ball detent version, but there's also a dovetail version.
Okay, gotcha.
On the one hand, I personally like Anvis, the Anvis mounting configuration, but also with the GPNVGs in particular, because I do, whether it's to media events, training classes, to demos or something like that, I'll take these GPNVGs around, and so the dovetail GPNVGs, they don't have an automatic shutoff.
Yeah, like the flipping back.
You flip them up, so there is always the potential that they can be left on in that position. Whereas, because of the way, the Anvis mount is designed, if that goggle's flipped up, it's not on.
Yeah.
And it's a very quick and easy way to know at a glance that goggle is off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny because again, another one of those things, and that was one thing that was told to me about having an external battery pack with a Dove. It's like, okay, well, if you have it, it's running off the external. If you just that way, it's unplugged, it's not running.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's a whole other question too, and we'll kind of move on from a little bit. But I'll do one more question. It's not really even a question. Quote: "Who has quads in stock?" by Salgado. So I'm assuming that those are mostly always built to order, or for the most part.
No. So I mean, we We order inventory. We have dealers that order them from us, but I believe everybody is currently out of stock and awaiting the next shipment from L3 Harris. So I mean,
just waiting whenever it comes in from L3.
And I will say that is among the reasons that I can say that the U.S. government is for sure still buying these systems. Is that part of the reason that that lead time is so long on GPNVGs,
fulfilling other contracts.
So certain government contracts, certain government orders, what are referred to as rated orders, will always take precedence over commercial inventory orders, over non-rated orders of any type, whether or not they're for a government customer. So if you have a rated order, you're always getting bumped to the front of the line. So that means that you're bumping everyone else back, and that's why that's why there are on a lot of these systems that were previously restricted to government purchases only. That was part of the reason. B, that's part of the reason that they're they have such extensive lead times.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have a significant quantity of inventory on order, again, to feed both our direct retail needs as well as dealer needs. We're hoping to eventually get to the point where we have a system or two in stock, but the demand is still greatly exceeding supply right now.
Yeah. Well, and if you know off the top of your head, what's the MSRP on them?
So for the Anvis version is $41,399, I think, off the top of my head, and the Dovetail version is closer to right around 40.
Okay. What is is there a popular in preference in those? Like, for the most part, I mean, when people are going out and there's a demand.
Dovetail by far.
Dovetail, yeah.
Yeah, the Binvis version by far outsells the Anvis version, and that really, I mean,
just preference and stuff.
I mean, that's across the board, just with NVGs in general. Dovetail is by far the most broadly preferred configuration.
Gotcha.
There are a few weirdos out there, myself included, who still like their ball detent mounts, who still like their Anvis stuff. But I mean, it's a definite and stark minority.
Yeah.
Compared to Dovetail systems.
Gotcha. So on top of that, so in just in regards, I think the biggest, I won't say it's not really a misconception. It's just like, I think the afterthought is when you are looking at night vision, most people forget about the mounting system and the helmet, and like that's always the big things I think people kind of forget about, because it's another thing you have to add. Otherwise you're just holding them with your hands, right? So with that, we have a couple of helmets in place, and I actually had asked you because I was looking at different helmets to switch out from Team Wendy. But so what is like? There's there's like a lot of helmet options, and like I think the primary ones are always Team Wendy, Ops Core. But like what is it that kind of makes them stand out compared to a lot of like other guys that are out there? Like, was it MSA? MS Tech.
Oh yeah, so MSA
just
is
as an
out
example.
there. I mean, first of all, if you're talking about ACHs, I mean, there's so many companies that again, this goes back to what we were talking about. When you are issuing a particular item, by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. They first of all, a single manufacturer is not going to cut it.
Right. Yeah.
And these things, just so ACHs, Army combat helmets, and similar derivatives are just everywhere out there. So that's one thing, and that's kind of the helmet that a lot of people are probably the most broadly familiar with is the ACH, the most available. A lot of times we will get customers who say, yeah, I've already got a helmet, because they ended up with an ACH from their time in service, or picked one up cheap at a surplus store or something like that. And it's what they know and what they're familiar with. But beyond that too, I mean, there's a decent number of quality helmets out there on the market. By Galvion, by MTech.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
There's the the Cry Airframe, which is a little bit of an older design, but still a very, very serviceable helmet. And then there is, of course, Team Wendy. Personally, to me, the Ops Core is probably, I think, the best helmet system out there, just in terms of an overall system design and just the amount of kind of the Fast family, the amount of kind of research and end user feedback and back and forth that's gone into the development of the of the Fast helmet. I mean, the legacy of the Fast helmet, I mean, really goes back to pre GWAT and to the start of to when Cry Associates and Artisan. So Cry Associates obviously became Cry Precision, and Artisan is the company that became Ops Core. We're working on various future soldier programs.
Sure.
And the FAST, the Future Assault Shell Technology, which is what FAST stands for, comes out of kind of that long history of development, and obviously Ops Core was purchased by Gentex, which has its own very long history of building helmets. And so just in terms of, like I said, the amount of thought that's gone into just about every aspect, and so the Fast SF, adopted by US SOCOM as the FTHS, family of tactical headborne systems, which includes the AMP, which includes not just the ground ballistic, but also the Fast SF Carbon, So that FTHS design, I think is just absolutely, probably the best that you can get on the market right now. The Fitband suspension system, that's continued to develop and evolve over the years, in my opinion, is probably the most stable suspension system that's available out there. The vented Lux liner is again a great system for both impact protection, as well as comfort and stability. So if you look at the Fitband system, and they're, some people say that they're less comfortable because of this Fitband system, but you can see along the sides, it's got those flat semi-rigid, that flat semi-rigid Fitband that when you put that on your head and when you tighten it down, it's got a lot of surface area. It conforms to your skull, and it keeps the whole thing very stable on your head. When I'm wearing an Ops Core helmet, I mean, unless I'm doing a lot of running and jumping around, probably 90% of the time I'm not even buckling the chin strap. Because it's just not necessary with that Fitband system. So there's a lot of other systems, on the market that use some sort of Fitband or some sort of dial system that, I don't, having used them all, I don't think they're as stable, and as good at supporting night vision systems as the Ops Core Fitband system. And on the one hand, comfort is a very subjective thing. What's comfortable to me may not be comfortable to you. And so when you put a helmet on, at a trade show or in a showroom or during a fitting or during testing or something like that, it's very possible that a less stable system that uses a softer suspension will be subjectively more comfortable. But so my argument to that would be what's really comfortable in prolonged wear is if your fucking helmet stays put, if your goggles stay put. The slightly increased, and again, I don't find the Fitband uncomfortable, but there are some that find it less comfortable than, like I said, other softer suspensions out there. I would, and this goes back to even me using the over the head comms instead of helmet mounted comms. I would rather have a little bit, accept slightly more discomfort, if that's even in fact what you get out of it, to have a little bit more utility. And so to me, when I think about wearing a helmet, I'm thinking about wearing it for hours at night with goggles on it. And you can see, I don't put as much stuff on my helmets as some folks do, but my helmets, they're not slick.
Yeah.
They've got stuff on them. So to me, that stability for long-term wear is ultimately far more comfortable than being slightly softer on my temples.
Sure. Yeah. And so I know with yours, I think I have this similar. So you have the IR light too on the back as well, and lights on the side, is everything like that, general white light, and then IR light too, and then battery pack on the back. But yeah, it's actually surprisingly lighter than I was expecting, because it's a ballistic one too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Which is that one of the new generations they've released?
This is the newest Fast SF.
Gotcha.
Here. So what he's looking at is my kind of
just general setup,
everyday wear, multicam dipped Fast SF, which is the so it's the commercial version of the the FTHS ground ballistic. It's super high cut helmet. And yeah, it's what's currently being issued to U.S. SOCOM and other special operations.
Yeah, and so when they do different generations, obviously things always rapidly changes. What's the difference between this model and the prior model? Because I can say I know, looking around, a lot of them, when I saw a bunch go on sale, people saying, oh, these new, but I'm assuming just lighter, or different cuts, new generations and stuff.
Right. So the the original Fast is more or less analogous to what is now referred to as the Fast XP, and it was referred to as a high cut helmet. So if you look at this, Fast Bump that I've got here, it had a similar profile to so this is the same profile as the Fast XP, is the standard high cut. The Fast SF has the super high cut, which was originally so it's about 5/8 of an inch higher, I think. So it gives a little bit more flexibility, and so the super high cut was originally introduced was originally introduced in what was called the Fast Maritime or the Fast MT. Mm-hmm. OpsCore has changed a lot of names, some
abbreviations, etc.
Yes, some minor things, and changed model designations, and that certainly doesn't help with some of the confusion that people might have about the different models of Fast. But basically, so the Fast SF used to be the US SOCOM standard ballistic helmet, but its protection rating was not as it didn't have as rigorous of a protection rating as the Fast XP. The Fast SF, once again uses a new material, so it is lighter, but provides the same So it's lighter not just because it's super high cut, but also because of the material itself. So it's a lighter material, but it still provides the same level of ballistic protection as the Fast XP did.
Gotcha.
And there's, again, even within the various different ops core helmets, there's several different materials that they've used for the shells. So even if they look very similar, they might not be using the same material for the shell. Obviously, the shell material is going to affect the ballistic rating as well
the
as
different
the weight.
cuts and stuff. Yeah,
and two different cuts. So for example, like there's the Fast XP, which is kind of again more or less the OG Fast helmet. And then there's also the Fast LE, which is a different, heavier material and is NIJ 3A rated, and so it is less costly, slightly heavier, and slightly better protection, or protection more tailored for domestic threats, and which is why it's called the Fast LE versus versus the DoD models, which are more tailored for kind of overseas threats.
Yeah, I wouldn't even realize that there would be a difference between those two, just in terms of like a DoD military use of it, and then them changing it to more of an LE and stuff like that, just for protection and stuff like that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really, they're really not. I mean, and people will argue for days on the internet about this, but they're really not significantly different, in my opinion. It's really what it comes down to is what is it tested against?
Yeah.
So things like a 357 Magnum or like a 44 Magnum are just not common rounds outside of the U.S. Whereas they're relatively common,
more common household. Yeah.
And
that makes sense too.
And so when the Department of Justice versus the Department of Defense make their wish list of what they want, this particular piece of armor to protect against, they'll list out the different rounds,
possible encounters, et cetera.
And so those lists just aren't the same, because they're two totally two separate organizations. And I would point out at this time also that I am not and have never claimed to be a ballistics and an armor expert.
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm speaking about this in the context of what I know, which is helmets. So I'm sure that somebody may find something to that I said slightly wrong to nitpick me on, but I mean, ultimately you're talking about two totally different organizations that have nothing to do with one another, and they come up with their lists of what, and that's why military SAPI plates are not they're not. They don't fit into the NIJ classifications, and vice versa. Now you do have some. You do have some companies that make armor that are compliant with both.
Sure.
DoD and DOJ, NIJ requirements and stuff like that. And also, the other thing is the NIJ, the 3A testing standard isn't even really for helmets.
It's more like for body armor too, isn't it?
It's for soft body armor. So there's a certain amount of adaptation. So when people talk about it's people will use words like compliant or
catchword, buzzwords,
or tested to NIJ standards or something like that versus like NIJ rated.
Yeah. That's funny. So like. That obviously, and that's kind of been the ones I've been looking at specifically. I've been like the ops core and stuff like that, and mostly it was for the different sizes and like the cuts too, being probably like you said. So when you're looking at those, like in comparison, like Team Wendy and stuff like that, I would imagine that's probably maybe the other most popular manufacturer who's putting out
Yeah,
helmets for the most part.
Yeah, so Team Wendy,
They've kind of been like they were purchased by somebody not too long ago as well.
Yeah.
Or
So they
changed ownership.
Yeah, they recently changed ownership. Yeah, I mean, Team Wendy, makes a decent helmet. We don't carry Team Wendy at TNVC. That's kind of its own history.
Yeah. We don't have to go. We don't have to go into that. That's fine.
Interested parties can look it up on the internet and find out all and read all. Of
Yeah. Fair enough.
But I mean, but ultimately, all of that aside, yeah, I mean, they make a decent helmet, and you're right that it's probably the next most popular and well-known helmet there. I also really like the Galvion helmets as well. And the Galvion Cayman was Galvion's entry into the FTHS competition. So it is similar in a lot of ways to the Fast SF.
Yeah.
I believe it's 3A rated, or I'm sorry, 3A tested as well.
It's funny. That's like I had a buddy text me like that's what I was looking at a minute ago, like that. I guess about an hour ago, and he was like, "Ask him about the Galvion, ask him about the Cayman." And so it's funny, and this is kind of like wild, but the only reason I know of that one prior was from video games, from like Tarkov, where it has them, has a lot of them listed and stuff like that, and that being one of the main ones, and the op score and stuff. So like it's just funny that
Yeah, I mean, I've used them, I've worn them, I've got one, Galvion Cayman. They're definitely not as common. They're a little bit harder to get a hold of. But I mean they're a good helmet if you can get one. And they kind of split the difference in terms of like the fit band suspension design, where it's a similar type of fit band, but it's also slightly skeletonized.
I'll say on top of that, because you were talking about like running around and stuff like that, and not having to wear chin strap. That's kind of like one of my issues I've had with the Team Wendy was like, while just wearing in general, it's comfortable, but I've noticed there's a significant amount of play. And it could just be me being really shitty at fitment, getting it set up correctly. But it doesn't have that kind of like, I don't want to say rigid, but like that more stricter band to kind of keep it in place.
Well, yeah. So I mean. So the team, the BOA system, the BOA retention system, that's used in the Team Wendy is it's a popular and it's a good retention system, but it's not necessarily designed for stabilization, for kind of static stabilization of a load in that way. So really the and I don't know how familiar you are with kind of all of with the design of the BOA or the history of the BOA or of Team Wendy or anything like that. But long story short, the BOA comes from the snowboarding.
Snowboarding, gotcha. Okay.
And then of course Team Wendy, kind of as a company, has some connections to the snowboarding industry as well. And they basically adopted what was originally designed. Now the BOA system has been repurposed,
altered and
for all sorts of different purposes, but its original design was for tightening snowboard boots. So it was to keep boots around your ankles. Which is an application that ultimately at the end of the day, it needs to have a lot more movement, needs to have a lot more flex, a lot more give in it, and long story short, the way that the BOA system achieves that tension and that tightening is really just nylon coated steel wires, which in the CamFit system they have like a suede boot over them. But it's really, so you're really talking about two very thin wires going across your head just with a soft boot over them, which, feels very comfortable because it conforms to the shape of your head. That little suede boot, feels nice and cozy on your head. But the design of the whole system is designed to allow for a lot more movement than the Fitband system in the Ops Core, which is designed to
be
go
on
on
the
your
helmet.
head,
Yeah,
and to stay on your head, and to not
Makes
move.
sense. And like you said, like that's how it, is. Like you said, it's just the whole thing was designed and incorporated all around that. Where they kind of like.
Which and again, I'm not saying that BOA systems are bad. I'm not saying that the CamFit system is bad. I mean, it's a decent, it's a good suspension. I prefer it to suspensions that don't have any tension adjustment mechanism. It's still more stable than a standard 4-point harness on an ACH that doesn't provide any tension. But stacked side to side with the OpsCore Fitband system, I mean, I just think that the OpsCore Fitband system is much better designed for the purpose that it serves in this particular context. Again, BOA system has been repurposed and reused for a lot of different things, but even so there are a lot of bike helmets that use BOA that use BOA systems now. But if you look at the designs of a lot of them, or at least the really good ones, while they have a BOA tension system, they also have a similar kind of semi-rigid fit system as well. It's not just steel wires up against your temples with a little fabric. With a little fabric covering, which, and then that fabric covering, if you wear it long enough and you use it long enough, it gets like bunched up, and next thing you know, you have exposed.
Yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, because but on top of that too, just when you have something that's more rigid and static, when you have weight in the front, that's going to play a pretty big role,
right?
Especially when you're doing something compared to something that's more obviously. Not as rigid, compared to something like that.
And that's kind of what I was talking about before in terms
of
long-term comfort versus immediate comfort. Whereas, when you first put them on your head, again, I would reiterate that I don't find the OpsCore helmet at any point uncomfortable, but comfort is very much a subjective thing. So I know, and I can certainly understand how some people find that system to be more comfortable. However, when you're talking about long-term wear for hours and hours, you're talking about the weight of NVGs cantilevered over the front, and then if the helmet is moving around a lot, then you have to be moving your neck to compensate for that. So while the immediate comfort of putting it on your head, one may be more comfortable than the other, in the long run, your long-term comfort, may be it I would say is most likely the more stable and more rigid system versus the more immediately comfortable, but then you have to allows for a lot more movement.
Yeah, and that's what I've experienced for the most part. Like you just saying that is the same thing. Is like putting it on, it's comfortable right at the moment, but then as the just wears on you a little bit because I feel like you're having to adjust and kind of like move around or even cinch it even more, so it's even putting even more squeaking your head almost. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. That kind of makes me even want to try to, for sure, before you go, try it on and compare them. But that's the thing. And so on top of that, there's like so many different layers of helmets too, even though we're talking about night vision. But then you have like the bump, which is obviously a cheaper entry option. And I think, like it's weight wise, they're obviously most of the time lighter compared to a ballistic, but it seems like some ballistic stuff's getting like super light too, though.
Yeah, well, and
as it advances,
and
pay the entry fee for.
I mean, exactly. So the big thing. I mean, weight used to be a major factor between ballistic and non-ballistic helmets, but as you kind of saw, it's not an issue, but it's becoming less of an issue as time goes on and technology advances, and and So yeah, I mean, for what it is and for what it does, the Fast SF is extremely light, and again, as is the Galvion Cayman and other helmets within that class. There's a variety of ultra lightweight helmets that still provide full spectrum protection. But they can all be pretty costly. So the bump helmet is a lot of times a much more cost effective option for guys, and if you don't really, if you don't have a whole lot of ballistic threats coming your way, it can be a very good option. Now, there's even within bump helmets, there's different classes, anything from $60 fast knockoffs that you can buy on Amazon or
eBay and whatever,
some airsoft website or something like that, and then of course there's the actual OpsCore fast bump, and then Team Wendy's got their version of the bump. Galvion's got a version of the Cayman. There are other bumps that are out there as well, and the advantage that you get from any of those systems, of course, is that they're still not only are they going to use higher quality materials, made in the U.S. With U.S. components, but they're also legitimately impact rated, which to me, I talked about it a little bit when I talked about the Luxliner system within the Fast SF. I mean, I don't think people give the impact protection offered by a helmet. I don't think they give it quite enough credit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they'll be like, well, why do I need to pay $300 or more for a name brand bump helmet that I'm just using to put
something
NVGs, just to hold NVGs on my head. Shouldn't anything that holds NVGs on my head be okay? And I mean, there's some truth to that if that's all that you're using it for, but ultimately, when you're using night vision goggles, even experienced users, you're going to have, just because of the nature of what night vision goggles are, the nature of how they work, you're going to have more chances to take a spill, to trip, to fall, and injure yourself in various ways. To say nothing of the people that are riding four-wheelers, side by sides,
sure,
on some sort of vehicles. And a lot of times next to shooting, when people are asked about their recreational uses for night vision, one of the most common ones is going hiking.
Yeah.
Going hiking in remote areas. Often, we were talking about this over dinner.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy to find somebody that wants to go and fuck around with you in the middle of the night. So a lot of times you're out in a remote area by yourself in the middle of the night, and if you're hiking, and especially if you're somewhere with more elevation, more technical trails or something like that, I mean, you could fall and bust your head, and all of those things, to me, for the average civilian enthusiast night vision user are probably much more credible threats, more likely threats,
right.
Vehicle accidents, falls that can cause head trauma, are far more likely and far more credible threats than ballistic threats, than getting shot in the head.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that it's if you're going to be doing those kinds of activities, it's probably a good idea to have a good impact rated helmet.
Yeah.
Rather than, I mean, what's the impact rating on a Chinese fast clone? No
one knows. Yeah. I mean, how would you know? So, with the bump helmets, are there different cuts like the ballistic, or it's just a one style cut with OpsCore at least? Yeah, just for OpsCore.
OpsCore right now, it's just there's just the high cut.
Yeah, because it really makes difference.
The next step up is the carbon composite, and there's a high cut carbon composite, and then there's a Fast SF carbon composite, which is based on the FTHS Coxswain's helmet. which is a super high cut. There have been people, and I have done this in the past, where you can take the rails from either a fast SF or a fast maritime, and you can put them on a high cut helmet, and so guys have definitely
trimmed it up and everything.
Yeah, trimmed the bump helmets to have a super high cut profile. But as of right now,
from the factory,
from the factory, the bump helmets are only available in high cut.
Gotcha. All right, so in regards to helmets and stuff like that, we'll kind of move on. But that's always been my interesting points, just especially because that's another part of the process of purchasing night vision in general and stuff like that. And of course the mounting options, which I don't think I've ever seen anything other than Wilcox mounting options. I don't even know if there is anything else other than Wilcox.
Neurodos is another company that makes helmet mounts. Neurodos. So you've probably seen a lot of Neurodos. It's generally the preferred USGI mount, at least for general purpose troops, conventional forces. So the old black Rhinos were made by Neurodos. The Rhino 2s are made by Neurodos, and they have a variety of higher end mounts. I think that Neurodos makes probably the best PVS 14 mount if you are planning to only ever use a PVS 14, and that's the INVG, which is it's got that triangular post in the middle rather than track, rather than rail.
Gotcha.
Like these, and then so you can actually rotate the PVS 14 up to the side.
Okay.
And kind of get it a little bit more out of the way, and you can do that whether it's in the deployed position or in the stowed position, and you can rotate it to to kind of bring the center of gravity in closer to your head. So it's probably the best PVS 14 exclusive mount. Now, a lot of times we will recommend to people, like, if you see yourself eventually getting duals or a bridge system, or going for a different type of goggle, then the G24 might be a better option. But the Wilcox G24, because it's more the INVG is a little bit of a one-trick pony. Because obviously if you take duals and you rotate them off to the side like that, it's really not helping you very much. So there and there's so CADX is another company that makes night vision mounts.
I've heard before,
I think Photonis has started making some mounts as well. So there's a couple of other companies out there that are making mounts.
Okay, so I'm gonna change it up a little bit and make it more conversational based. But in terms of night vision in general, I think the core thing right now, a lot of people think is kind of fading away. I would say from like mono to monocular, like a PVS 14. It seems like everyone's kind of pushing towards dual. I mean, what do you think as a I'll say entry level, as someone who's interested in, not saying like they're going to go ball out or anything like that, but in terms of bang for buck, do you think it's kind of gearing towards binos, or like what do you think?
So
or experience wise,
the market, both the commercial market and professional end users are absolutely starting to trend more heavily towards binos. We discussed earlier when we were talking about the panos as well. You have ENVGB. Obviously, USOCOM has been using binos, for years. Aviators have pretty much always used binos. Some of that, not to dig too far.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Too far into the history, but long story short, I mean, we've always known that two eyes are better than one.
Right.
That's a really kind of, it seems like a very basic kind of thing to say, but two eyes is better than one. And the first kind of widely issued ground night vision goggle system, the PVS-5, was a dual tube system, issued back in the 70s. And then from there, so the PVS-5 was a Gen 2 system. From there, PBS 5 got kind of a shaky relationship with the aviation community. There were and a lot of times they were disallowed from being used by aviators, but there were things like Cobb conversions to convert them into more similar to an ANVIS format type of goggle. But long story short, after the PBS 5 and moving into kind of the Gen 3 era, night vision, U.S. military night vision systems kind of start to diverge, where the ANVIS system, the aviator's night vision imaging system, is what ANVIS stands for, is a dual tube system, has always been a dual tube system, has never not been a dual tube system. As a matter of fact, panoramic goggles were originally developed for aviation applications, not for ground applications, because for what the aviators were doing, that
need the view, yeah, makes sense.
Well, it's again, two eyes is better than one. You want to have the best vision possible when you're operating an aircraft. Go in the other direction for ground troops, for infantry and other ground troops. The DoD kind of looked at what was the major expense in terms of night vision goggles, and obviously that it was then, as it is now, the image intensifier tube, and they determined that for what ground troops do, one tube was enough. And so they developed the PBS-7 first, which uses a single tube, but it's got a beam splitter in there.
Yeah, that's the one with the single in the middle,
right? So it's a biocular system, and it's a single image, but it's projected into both eyes. From the PBS-7, obviously, was developed then the PBS-14 monocular, which is just one straight tube over, and you pick which eye you want to put it over. And that PBS-14, has been a long-standing. I mean, it's still issued, still being used.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's still,
and it's been a long-standing system that's been out there. And in all honesty, PBS-14 will probably do about 90% of what most people, or I should say, PBS-14 is more than enough for probably 90% of people, in terms of what they are actually doing, in terms of the way that what their needs are. Doesn't mean that binos aren't better. It doesn't mean that binos aren't cooler. It doesn't mean that there aren't scientific and physiological advantages to having two eyes. But practical and operational terms, in practical and operational terms, for most people, a monocular will probably suffice.
Okay.
And it's a good entry level system. It gets you into that. It gets you into that capability. Now, that being said, in the last couple of years, obviously, like I said, U.S. SOCOM, it started, pretty much as soon as the night vision system started diverging, where special operations folks would go use aviator goggles instead of the ground goggles that they were being issued. So special operations has been using dual tube goggles for forever, but now conventional forces, general purpose forces, and then even into law enforcement are all beginning to see that there's definite advantages to using both eyes, and so again, that's why ENVG-B is the binoculars. There were previous versions of the ENVG, the PSQ-20, which was a monocular, which was a fusion monocular system. Several iterations of those were developed and fielded, and they're being phased out for binoculars. Like I said, Marine Corps is also moving from PBS-14s to binocular systems. And then law enforcement, whereas the requests that we would get for law enforcement, used to pretty much always be PBS-7s or PBS-14s. They're increasingly interested in dual tube systems. And like I said, there are some definite advantages, and there are some definite reasons why dual tube systems, are better than a single monocular. Just like the obvious, two eyes is better than one. There will be people, there will be certain claims, there will be certain arguments in favor of a single PVS 14 over binoculars, and that's its own own set of discussions.
Sure.
But in terms of a baseline capability, the jump from no night vision to PVS 14 is vast orders of magnitude greater than the jump from PVS 14 to dual tube.
Okay. Yeah.
And so for that reason, it's a great entry level system. And the other thing is, even if you do eventually upgrade into duals, it never hurts to have a spare PVS 14. And that's whether you just want something that's more compact. The PVS 14, one of the nomenclatures for the PVS 14 is the pocket scope, because you could put it in a cargo pocket, or you can put it in a pouch. It's so for more covert applications, for more low profile applications, for when you just don't need a full set of binos or something like that. It's great. If you are an aspiring influencer, it's great for photography. If you have buddies that
need to borrow something,
not yet made that leap and bought their own night vision, it's great to have as a loaner. So it never hurts to have a PVS 14. Even after you have duals, even after you have quads, I keep them all on hand, and I keep them all handy, because there are times that PVS 14s are useful.
Yeah. So especially with that, so one thing that I know I've had people ask, and it was myself included when I was looking, is like resale value. So like, for instance, you do take that jump and you want to maybe upgrade. Do they still retain value like the PVS? I mean, obviously it sounds like they most likely do, just because there is a demand for them. But, do they still retain value as everything kind of trends more towards binos a little bit, at least commercially?
Right now, all things night vision are holding their value pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just with
no, and as a matter of fact, I would say historically, PVS 14s have held their value better than binos have. Now, again, the current time period is a little bit of an anomaly.
Yeah.
In that, everything is just holding value super well. But because PVS 14s are so ubiquitous, because there's always going to be more people wanting to enter the night vision community than kind of the old hats of the night vision community. There's always going to be a need. There's always going to be a demand for PVS 14s and for monoculars. And like I said, while there are definitely situations where it might be better to have a dual tube system, 90% of people, 90% of what you do can be done with a PVS 14.
Yeah.
And so PVS 14s have historically held their value pretty well, whereas a lot of times I will see dual tube systems, again, right now everything's holding its value well, and I think that a lot of the systems these days, will continue to hold value well, but I would say that there might be a slightly greater depreciation with duals, and I don't think that really has anything to even do with quality or anything like that. But when you're talking about resale, you got to think about ultimately you got to think about the customer population. When you think about the customer population, if you upgraded the duals once already, because most people follow that path, they start with a PVS 14, get duals, and then kind of, everything just spirals from there. So I think the people who start getting into duals are probably the type of people that change their gear and upgrade their gear more often. So and night vision industry, just like just like anything else, there are sometimes trends and fashions that go along.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, again, night vision as a whole, I think holds value pretty damn well, and historically has. But if I was going to make a call as to which depreciates, more, I would say that the duals probably depreciate slightly more than because if you've got the duals, you probably have a certain amount of interest in having the latest and greatest, and at a certain point, whatever you get is no longer the latest and greatest. PVS 14 is a PVS 14. It's been a PVS 14 for the last 20 years. It's ubiquitous.
That's pretty amazing, though, the fact that something 20 years ago is still basically holding and retaining right where it's at. But like you said, I guess the entry level, because you're still just using one tube as well.
Right. Well, but I mean, not only that, we talked about before the ANVIS tubes, the MX-10160 format tubes that are in these GPNVGs are the exact same type of tubes or the same format of tubes. Obviously, there have been vast improvements in performance since 1989, but
overall, though, the system,
technologically, they're like an M16A1 to an M4.
Yeah.
In that improvements have been made, and it's not the same rifle, it's not the same tube, but like the guts, the
bones
of the
are still
and the way it works. I mean, Gen 3 technology has been around for a decent amount of time.
Is it what would be the next step in like technology wise, or it may be one of those convoluted questions, but like a Gen 4, like when would you expect to see a Gen 4 tube come out? I mean, or this, I'm sure it's always evolving. There's always something behind the doors that's being done or made.
So what I will say is that, back in the day, the assumption was that when filmless technology, unfilmed technology was developed, that it would be designated, Generation 4. Now, on the one hand, if I could, answer this question for you with absolute certainty and confidence, then I would probably be doing something very different and be making a lot more money. I don't have the crystal ball of what's going to happen in the future. That being said, my inclination is that just like a lot of things, I don't think there's ever going to be a Generation 4, because I think that linear type of evolution is no longer accurately describes the way the technology has been developing. So for example, photonous tubes, So one of the big differences between Gen 2 and Gen 3 tubes is the gallium arsenide the gallium arsenide photocathode architecture that the Gen 3 tubes use versus the multi-alkali photocathode that Gen 2 systems use. The photonous tubes are, so they call it a hybrid multi-alkali. It's so basically the Photonus continued developing multi-alkali photocathodes far beyond the point that U.S. manufacturers abandoned that architecture in favor of gallium arsenide and developed Gen 3 technology. So on the one hand, Photonus tubes are technically Gen 2 architecture, but their performance is nothing like what people typically think of, or what people used to think of. Now people more closely associate Gen 2 with Photonus tubes, but even like 10 years ago, I mean, Gen 2, people were thinking like PVS 5 level performance and technology. So there are there are ways in which, there are circumstances in which the Photonus tubes are rivaling Gen 3 performance, particularly in brighter conditions. And that's, but they're using that Gen 2 architecture. So what the hell do you call them? Obviously,
like 2A, I guess.
Photonis calls the technology, they call it 4G. They're very careful to make sure that the distinction is made that they are not claiming
the 4th gen,
that these are 4th generation or Gen 4 image intensifier tubes, but you can kind of tell they want to.
Yeah.
They're 4G tubes. So they call their technological architecture that 4G because for obvious reasons they don't want to actively associate themselves with Gen 2, which is considered a step backwards. Gen 4 has not been assigned, has not been designated. It's not Gen 3. And then, again, we're talking, as we were talking about before, there are developments in digital technology, multispectral technologies, fusion systems. And so it's no longer like a linear evolution of technology.
Yeah, it's like just branching off
Gen
now.
0 and Gen 1 and Gen 2 and Gen 3. And each generation was better than the last at image intensification. Now it's kind of a more it's a broader proliferation of different types of technologies. So maybe eventually they'll decide, all right, let's just call this Gen 4.
Yeah.
But I think that the relevance of a potential Gen 4. I mean, I think that way of thinking about the technological development, obviously, historically, Gen 0, Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, have and always will have meaning.
Whatever meaning, yeah.
But I don't think that, I just don't think that model is going to accurately develop the way the technology is going to continue to develop in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense too. So on top of that, like just basic coverage as we kind of start wrapping up a little bit, especially like just with night vision in general. But so for some of the basic things when you're looking at night vision, I guess one, you always want to look at like one, what your budget is, two, total cost, and then I guess you would say like use, especially since like you said, if 90% of what you could do could be done with a single mono,
Yeah, I mean, so whenever people ask me what they should get, I mean, I tell them that it really comes down to two major factors. What's your budget, and what do you plan to do with it? And then from there, and it is one of the things that we do pride ourselves as part of our mission to educate at TNVC is whether you're an individual civilian, whether you're law enforcement or military. What we can do is, because a lot of our primary staff are veterans, are end users. We've used this equipment on duty. And so we have that kind of context, and we have we have that experience. Is to be able to make essentially customized recommendations based on your on what your use requirements are, and really honestly what you can afford to spend on them. Because at the end of the day, you can have all sorts of use requirements. If you can't afford them, though,
it's pointless.
Just can't afford them.
Yeah. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. If you got to be able to pay for them. And as much as I would love to be able to give everybody free nods, I can't really do that. Yeah.
So I mean, budget and what you intend to do with them. Those are the things that I need to know, that we need to know, and we can essentially make a personalized recommendation for you as to what you're doing. What's going to be the most bang for your buck. What's going to provide you the most value? What's going to provide you the most enjoyment if you're using them? If you're using them recreationally, what's going to what's going to be what's going to be mission critical to you. So I mean, even you talk about law enforcement context, and I don't have any law enforcement background. We've got guys on the staff that have law enforcement backgrounds, but even with what limited knowledge I have on the way law enforcement works, I mean, there's different sets of requirements within different sets of circumstances. What you need to do entries on a SWAT team is not necessarily going to be the same thing that you need to do surveillance. Same thing that you need to do search and rescue. The same thing may not be the same thing that you need for a pursuit or something like that. So I mean, being able to articulate specifically what your needs are, and so kind of where that distinction becomes important, for example, is if you say it's like, well, I've got a fairly open-ended budget, I can afford both duals or monoculars. There's if you're doing entry on a SWAT team, I might recommend, because you're doing, because it's kind of a fast-moving activity, very very taxing, on your processing speed, a very high premium put on spatial awareness, depth perception, and all of these various benefits that come along with a dual tube system. I might say, you want to favor a dual tube system, and maybe you don't need the highest top of the line tubes because it's going to bust your budget. Obviously, I'd love to recommend to everybody to get the most expensive, the highest quality dual tube systems that there are out there, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
You've got to make these decisions. Whereas if you say that you're doing a lot of surveillance, where you need to do a lot of detail work, or you're spending a lot of time relatively static or moving relatively slowly, but it's very important that there's a very high premium
clarity in everything
placed on detail and identification. Then I might say what you need is to put all of your money into the highest performing PBS-14, the highest performing binocular that you can possibly get, because that could be the difference between recognizing a particular individual at 100 yards.
Yeah, and so I think that was a perfect expansion of it too, because I think that'll be some good clarification, especially for people who are trying to, I think, justify maybe going one way or the other. I guess like the one other big thing I would say is what are the big do nots with night vision? Like I feel like there's always misconceptions with that too, like in general, and there's probably different trains of thought, but like the big no-nos of
buying or in terms of using?
I would say using in general, but we can probably I should have just started that with buying, but obviously I didn't want to gear towards anyone and everyone because that defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
But we'll stick to just using and stuff like that, like leaving on, or like like I feel like there's always been a kind of a misconception on stuff like leaving batteries in. Like what is something like on care of when you have the unit and you've gotten it, like you just need to take priority on taking care of it.
So that's kind of a tough question, at least for me to answer, in that I feel like there's a lot of people out there who think that NVGs are a lot more delicate than they are.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of people, if I tell people they're not as delicate as you think there are, then there are people who are going to
just destroy them.
Just absolutely with them. And then blame it on me and say, well, Augee said that they were designed to be handed to an 18-year-old infantryman, and they should be able to survive just about anything that I would do to it. It's...
We'll just say general care, or like just, general usage.
Yeah, I mean, so in general care, I mean, I would say the big thing is, just make sure they're turned off. And if you're storing them long term, take the batteries out.
Yeah.
That's the largest, the largest causes of problems or issues with NVGs. Usually has to do, and ultimately, and here's the other thing, both of those things are classed as user error.
Yep.
And then, of course, dropping them, or damaging or abusing them in any other way. So first of all, don't abuse them.
Yeah.
Just in general, don't abuse them. You probably paid a decent sum of money for them, or if you didn't pay for them yourself, somebody paid a decent sum of money for these. So don't abuse them. Don't intentionally treat them like shit. Don't try to do the PMAG torture test video on your PBS 14. It's not going to end well for you. But beyond that, just making sure and double checking that the thing is turned off. Because, and this has happened before, guys will swear up and down that, no, it was turned off, I swear it was turned off. And then you get the tube back, and it's literally their kitchen lights. You can see, I can see, the layout of the lights, and you left this on inside. And you set it down, and you forgot about it, and you're trying to tell me, no, I didn't leave it on. Double check. Always be sure. Always be certain that they're off when you want them to be off. And then, again, if you're not going to be using them within the next day or two, take the batteries out. Even if you got good quality lithium batteries, lithium batteries, don't leak or explode as often as alkalines, but it's still a possibility.
It's a risk.
And is it really worth it?
Yeah. Take an extra 30 seconds to unscrew a little thing and take a battery out just to be safe.
So I mean, and those really are the two primary causes of problems with NVGs that we get across the board. Now the other thing, the question that we get asked a lot is about light exposure. How much light exposure is going to damage. Is going to damage the unit. How much light exposure can the unit take? And the thing that I tell people is, you got to think about it kind of like, the barrel of a gun. In that, every time you turn your NVGs on, so the barrel of a gun, everybody kind of accepts. Barrel is a consumable item ultimately. It's got a finite lifespan. Now you can affect what that lifespan is by how you use it, but every time you shoot a bullet through your barrel, you are technically damaging it.
Yeah.
Same thing is true of vintage intensifier tubes. Every time you turn that thing on, every time you expose it to light, whether that's visible or near IR light, you are technically causing a
wearing
itty bitty bit of damage
Gotcha.
to that system. And the more light you expose it to, it's just like the more rounds you shoot through a barrel. If you expose it to a ton of light, you're going to toast that tube pretty quickly. Just like if you're doing a bunch of mag dumps with your rifle, you're going to toast that barrel pretty quickly. If if you're very, very careful about the amount of light exposure, then it's not. Then it's going to last a great deal longer. Now, those are two extremes of the way different people use their equipment, whether it be their firearms or their night vision goggles. If you're like most people, you're probably somewhere in the middle. That is to say, and I'm not going to do it, but I could turn these goggles on. We're sitting here, at the table with the overhead lights. I could turn them on, with no lens caps on, and the goggles will be fine. I can turn them on, and they will be okay. But I've exposed them to a lot of light, so they're not going to immediately self-destruct because I turned them on in a brightly lit room. But it's not good for them. It's not something that I would recommend that you do often. The only real exceptions to that are extremely high intensity light sources, which can cause a lot of damage very quickly. So, for example, something like a laser that can push a lot of light in a very concentrated area very quickly can cause very quick and very immediate damage. If you are if you are in a brightly lit urban or suburban area, for hours and hours and hours, you might get some shadowing and some artifacts within. It's all it depends on the level of use and the level of intensity. And so there are ways to cause almost immediate light damage to your NVGs. However, generally speaking, light's not going to hurt them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just unneeded excessive exposure, of course, will just wear them down faster than if you had just been a little more mindful of when you had them on and off. Okay, and that's like the thing. I mean, it's like it's been kind of like almost, I don't know, obviously I think everyone knew not to have them on directly looking at lights and leaving them on and stuff, but like there's always like a a misconception, like you put caps on them, or if
we've gotten calls from guys, and again, I get it. It's for a lot of people, it's a very significant investment, and people will be like, I accidentally turned my night vision goggle on like in my room, the kitchen.
Yeah.
And they'll be freaking out like did I destroy my night vision goggles? It's like they're not Fabergé eggs. They'll survive that. Your goggles are good. But then there are also people but like I said, there are also people that'll go the other direction, and then be like, oh well, I thought they would be fine if I
stared at the sun for an hour.
Yeah, if I walked around in bright daylight, or I sat there and I stared at police lights all night with them, and then it's just like.
Yeah, there's never going to be,
which is and I bring that up because that is sometimes if you're a law enforcement officer and you're standing on a perimeter or something like that, and you're relatively static, and the flashing lights right there in the corner are always right there in the corner, and you're there for 3 hours, you may get some damage, possibly even permanent damage from that. Because it's high intensity.
Yeah, it was a high LED.
Being delivered in volume to the to the image intensifier tube. So again, that's why I said they're
exceptions to everything.
Yeah, they're not as delicate as some people think they are, but they're not like they're not an ACOG. They're not they're not indestructible. You need to be careful with them.
Yeah.
But I think for most people, if you generally exercise appropriate care with something that you paid anywhere from $2,000 to $40,000 for, make sure they're off when you intend for them to be off. Don't leave batteries in them unnecessarily, and try to avoid exposing them to unnecessary light sources. They're going to be fine, and they're going to last you, quite a long time.
Yeah, that was going to be I was going to wrap it up right there, but like average life of just a tube under usual use. Obviously, there's so many little parameters of things that could go on, but just standard average use of like a median.
So the military specification for mean time to failure, which is a significant, so mean time to failure, or the failure in mean time to failure, MTTF, is not defined by like your tube just shuts off at the end of that. It's significant degradation in performance to where it's no longer considered serviceable. The mean time to failure of Gen 3 image intensifier tubes is supposed to be 10,000 hours.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where once it meets the spec, like, what I mean to say is there's evidence to suggest that many modern tubes will last far longer than 10,000 hours, but because the minimum spec is 10,000 hours mean time to failure, there's no real need for anyone to kind of bother with testing significantly further than that. Though I think there are some just kind of destructive tests going on at government manufacturer levels to really try and dial down what that is. However, again, This is mean time to failure, and this is mean time to failure across, all image intensifier tubes. That means it's the average.
Yeah.
It again,
bounce around
varying,
right there.
based on lighting conditions, and based on, the service life of that image intensifier tube can significantly affect the lifespan of that tube. And the way they actually do that mean time to failure testing is by, because obviously they're not, 10,000 hours is a pretty long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're not like making a tube and like letting it sit for 10,000 actual hours. They're they're conducting an accelerated wear process that's supposed to kind of simulate the amount of light that it would receive over a given amount of time, and that's where they're getting that 10,000 hour mean time to failure figure from. There's, there are tubes from the late 80s, early 90s that some guys are still using, and they're working just fine. Again, the other thing that I would say is and I've got spec sheets to these GPNVGs right here. Those spec sheets, they're a snapshot in time of the performance of that goggle at the time that they were, or the times, because not all of the tests are performed exactly the same time.
Yeah.
But it's a snapshot of the tube's performance. Again, like a rifle barrel, it's a slow degradation process over time. It's not like it's like I said, it's not. It doesn't mean that your tube suddenly goes black.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, like the more you use it, your tube is always slightly degrading, and it is quite possible that some of these tubes from the late 80s, early 90s, that guys are still using today, would no longer be considered serviceable by the DoD. That they would be considered to have failed based on their performance degradation over that amount of time. However, guys are still using them perfectly fine right now. So again, it depends on how intensely you use them, how much light they're exposed to, and that's so. Generally speaking, we tell people, for the most part, your tubes are probably going to, if they don't outlast you, they're going to last you a good long time. I think at some point we, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we broke down, 10,000 hours, and I think it came out to something like you'd have to spend 3 years using your goggles 8
nonstop
hours every night, or something absurd like that. And I'm not a math person.
Yeah, but still, just averaging.
It's something. It's something absurd. That's not realistic
for general use, especially commercially. Yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you dedicating your time to come over and doing all this, answering all these questions, and just kind of really breaking down.
Yeah, happy to. I feel like we went in all sorts of different directions here.
That's the best part, though. That's the best part. But I feel like that's I think a lot of people don't think about some of that. And then at the same time, I was definitely interested in history, background, and kind of how things, projecting forward, not necessarily accurately, but always getting input and your thoughts and stuff. Because you're still very savvy.
I have a tendency to ramble. I think
I'm the same way.
I told you, I forewarned you that I used to be a college professor. So I can get off on these, I can get off on these tangents and these long kind of digressions into obscure topics while somehow managing to avoid answering the actual question.
That's exactly what I do all the time. People that I know me will know that I do exactly the same thing, and then I'll get around to the answering the question, the last part, just because I'll go on to different branches around, but still so much information, stuff like that. And so I think mostly a lot of people Instagram is the popular. So your handle is on Instagram. What's your handle for you? And then we'll get TNVCs as well.
It is Augee_Kim, I think.
Okay.
AUGEE. A lot of people misspell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's pretty simple. I tend to just use my name for most things.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm pulling up now. So yeah. AUG TNVCEE_Kim KIM, and that is, and then also of course TNVC at TNVC_INC as well. If you want to check them out and follow them, and a lot of people I'm sure already are. But again, thank you so much for your time. Dedicating answering questions and just really covering a lot of material, because I know it's always extensive too. Like you said, like instead of getting the same email every day, at least if there's a projected source. If people have questions, they can listen and reference to. So thanks so much, and it was a blast again.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right.